Die is toch altijd Israëlisch. Sorry, de pro-Palestijnse. Dat we feitelijk kennen. Rijns voor.
A warm welcome to the Nieuwe Liefde. The whole evening will be in English. I hope that's okay. The only thing we need to translate for Mr. Shlomo Sand is the Nieuwe Liefde. The Nieuwe Liefde is Dutch for a new love, which is, I think it sounds better in Dutch, so I will just keep saying, we are now in the Nieuwe Liefde, but when I say the Nieuwe Liefde, I'm actually saying we are here in the new love.
Say fresh love.
Fresh love. Fresh love. Sounds even better. This evening is organized in cooperation with the Nieuwe Liefde, the Leonard Woltjer Stichting en Een Ander Joods Geluid. Ik wil u vragen, eerst komt zo meteen Shlomo Sand aan het woord. Daarna hebben we 3 respondenten bereid gevonden tot een hele puntige reactie. Daarna komt Shlomo nog een keer. Al die tijd moet u nog geduldig zijn met wat u eventueel zelf wil vragen. En daarna kunt u ook zelf aan het woord komen. Dus het laatste half uur is ook gesprek met de zaal. Dus dat alvast ter geruststelling als u merkt dat u steeds verder op het puntje van uw stoel gaat zitten. Omdat ik denk dat er een hele hoop gezegd zal worden wat u aanspreekt of juist niet aanspreekt. In ieder geval wat u raakt. And now I will change to English. Shlomo Sand says of himself that he is a man with brown eyes and of average height, which, as you can see, is true. Now, what is not so average about him is the way he operates as a historian. So first of all, his approach is very personal. If you read his books, you will notice that he begins by describing his own experiences. And what is maybe even more special and not average is that he is deconstructing myths surrounding the state of Israel. Now, as we all know, every state, also the Dutch state, is based on stories that are actually myths. Nevertheless, we maintain a certain kind of a national identity. And in the case of the state of Israel, which says of itself it's a Jewish state, this is actually quite problematic, because being a Jewish state means that 1/3 of the people also living in that state are not fully citizens. And the same Jewish state is actually occupying and colonizing another people. So Shlomo Sand is actually quite courageous in uncovering these myths. And I think it's very important that he is doing that, so I'm very happy that he is here, and I'm also very happy to give the floor to Shlomo Sand.
I'm sorry to speak English and not Hebrew or French. You know, I am not very strong in English. You will forgive me if I will make a lot of mistakes, okay? I hope. If you come here with a lot of love, it's okay. You know, I am very normal. I want that people will love me, and this is one of the reasons that I'm writing books. But the result is not always love, unfortunately. Thank you for coming, really, everybody of you, even the representative of the Israeli ambassador here. Welcome. You see, I'm an Israeli from Jewish origin, also a professor of history in Tel Aviv University till now. And in some moment in my career, in my life, I decided to write something more serious about the past than all my books before it. You know, I'm a specialist of Western civilization, modern contemporary civilization. But after I got the titularization of a full professor, I decided to write something more important, really. And then, you see, I decided to write about Jewish, Zionist, and Israeli history. Three books I wrote: The Invention of the Jewish People, The Invention of the Land of Israel, and the last, very personal little book was How I Stopped Being a Jew, an Israeli point of view. By the way, in English, they didn't put the subtitles, and I'm not happy with it. It's very, very important, was for me. Not that I'm proud to be Israel guy, a professor, but I'm not ashamed also about it. Now, why I wrote these books? To be loved. By whom? I hope by, intelligent people. And I thought that writing this book, we can help. I have a political agenda. I want to continue to live in Israel, in Tel Aviv, and I decided that the good reason to continue to live in Tel Aviv is to write this book. The first book, The Invention of the Jewish People, I wrote it during the year 2006, 2007. And I believed in that moment that the process of peace will continue, and the problem of territory will be less important in the climate, the intellectual climate in Israel. I make a big mistake. I thought that I have to decompose the idea that Jewishness, Jews, Judaism is a people race or something like this. Why? Because I believe that historically the history of Jews are much more interesting. It's a plural history. And I thought that writing, searching the origin of Jews and some history of the Jews will help to decompose racist feelings in Israel. Now, I believe that the question of territory will be settled sooner or later very quickly in 10 years ago. I will make a big mistake, I will explain myself later. Anyway, you see, it started with the new discovery of the Israeli archaeologue that come to the conclusion, in my own university, in Tel Aviv University, that the exodus of Jews from Egypt didn't happen. You know, even when I was a leftist in my young years, radical, and you know, like an old man, I am very moderate politically today. But even in that time, I believe about the story about the exodus. I was sure that the exodus of the Jewish from Egypt happened. I was sure that the kingdom of David and Solomon was a historical reality. I was sure that the exile of Jewish from Palestine was a real history. Even when I was an anti-Zionist, and I'm not today an anti-Zionist, I will explain later. Then I was shocked to discover that historically the Jewish exodus from Egypt is a myth, more than a myth, a legend. And after the kingdom, the big kingdom of the kingdom of David, Solomon, is also a myth. You know, in Israel, everyone, all the Jewish Israelis, are studying the Bible from 7 years old till the 18 years old. They study the Bible as a historical book, not as a theological book, as a historical book. It's the first history book that I read in my life. Then, you see, I felt that I'm a part of this exodus, I'm a part of this kingdom, I'm a part of this exile, all this, it was a part of me. When I was young, radical, I didn't think that it's normal to justify the colonization, the Zionist colonization by the history of 2,000 years old, that, you know, we were expelled 2,000 years ago. We started to travel in the world. We arrived till Moscow. We make a U-turn. We return to Jerusalem. I didn't think that it's justification of the Zionist colonization in my young years. You understand me? I justified the existence of Israel because, you know, it's a result of some colonization like United States, like Australia, but never thinking that 2,000 years can be a justification of colonizing, pushing away another population. You understand me? But I continue to believe of the existence of Jewish people, Jewish nation, that traveled during 2,000 years. Then I started to write. By the way, I was a full professor. I wasn't afraid, you understand? Before it, I was afraid. And then I discovered that, for example, because I have only 30 minutes, 31, I discovered, can I take the it's okay? Yeah. I discovered, you know, writing about the myth of the Bible, arriving to a point discovering that the exile of the Jews from Palestine didn't happen. You can imagine it? As Jews, as Christians, as you want. You know, I remember, and this is the highest point, the peak of my book. I remember going to the Tel Aviv library, university library, looking for books about the act of exile of the Jews from Palestine. in 70 after Jesus Christ or 132 after Jesus Christ. I was sure, that the Jews were exiled from Palestine. A lot of you till now believe in it, no? Of course, because it is a Christian myth, not a Jewish one. In the 3rd century, the Christian try to explain that the Jews were expelled from Judea because, they were the murderers of the Son of God. Then, the notion of exile of the Jews from Palestine was Christian. You believe in it? Now, one thing important, because you have to doubt a lot of things that I'm going to say. If somebody will find a scientific or research book about the act of exile, I will burn all my books till now. You can imagine? The idea, a myth about the exile of the Jews from Judah, there is not even one historical book about it. How come? I remember looking for a book like this and I didn't find it. And I think that something is wrong about historical education. You understand me? Even one book, research book, you have to understand in the Israel Declaration of the State in 47, it was written that we are expelled from Palestine. We suffer from the exile. The exile didn't happen. And I remember arriving to this point. Immediately I asked myself 2 questions. If the Jews were not expelled from Palestine, 2 questions. What happened with them in place? I mean, what happened with the population in place? First question. Second question, how come that there are so many Jews in the world? Okay? For the first question, it was clear that the population was converted in some moment to Christianity, if it wasn't exiled. In the second step, they were converted to Islam. Massively. You know why? Because the Islam is much more near to Judaism, basically, than Christianity. Even if you are using today the word Judo-Christianity civilization. It's become popular in the last 20 years, no? Judo-Christianity civilization. My grandparents didn't know this expression in the 40s of the Judo-Christianity civilization, unfortunately. To return to the question, most of the Jews in Palestine were converted to the Islam. Then the chance that a member of Hamas, for example, by the way, I don't believe that the Palestinians are the real Jews or the real descendant of Judaism at all. Because, every people, every population is a mix of a lot of things. Even you, the Dutch. The Wilders doesn't know it, but really, we all are mixed. And some moment the Palestinians ask me, are we the real Jews? I say that every conqueror left his sperm in this area. You understand? We are mixed of a lot of things. But the chance that a member of Hamas will be a descendant of the ancient Hebrew, the ancient Jews, is much greater than me. Because the second answer that I was looking, how come that there are so many Jews in the world? Very quickly I started to understand that Judaism was the first monotheism, proselytic monotheism. You don't believe me? Because from the 4th century, 3rd century, 4th century, Judaism closed itself. It was a sine qua non condition, to survive under the Christianity and after it under the Islam. You understand? But before it, from the 2nd century before Jesus Christ, they were a proselytic monotheism. You know the term, the word Maccabean? You know what they did when they conquered a piece of land? You have to read Joseph Flavius to discover that when they conquer the land, they give an alternative to the people that they conquered, or to become Jews or to leave and to be kicked away. You have to read Flavius to discover that Judaism was the first proselytic monotheism till the 4th century. If you will ask me later questions about it, I can come in because my profession is historian, okay? But I will continue. Not only individuals become Jews in the world, but a lot of kingdoms. Not only the Khazarian. You heard the word Chemyar? No? Chemyar? Somebody knows the word Chemyar? It's the ancient Yemen. It's a kingdom that in the 5th century became Jews. Maybe you think that, the nice girls of Jewish Yemen, the nice girls are Jewish. They are Jewish, but they are not descendants of David the king. Even in Israel today, it's very funny. My student, Yemen student, believed that they are descendants of Sva, the queen of Sva, that visited Jerusalem and slept with Solomon. Went back to Ethiopia, to Yemen, and built a new nation there from the seed of Solomon. It's not a joke. They believe in it. Anyway, they don't know nothing about the kingdom, about the Jewish kingdom. It's unbelievable what is history. Anyway, 5 kingdoms, Jewish kingdoms, were converted to Judaism during the ages. This is the reason that there are so many Jews in the world. If you want, I will return it with the questions, okay? Nobody contests the fact that all the details, facts in my book are real, but they say that I organize it differently. Now, because I don't have time and I promise not to pass the 30 minutes, finishing the book, the invention of the Jewish people, you have to understand, it was very simple for me. When I wrote the invention of the Jewish people, the motivation was very strong by asking a simple question. What is a people? Why and when we are using the word people? Folk. You understand? People in the sense of folk. Am in Hebrew. Then if I say that there is a Dutch people, there is a Dutch people, usually we say, yeah, it's composed with a lot of things. But today, we can say Dutch people. You belong to the Dutch people, yeah? There is Italian people that are eating pasta and all this. More or less. There is a French people, more or less. There is a German people, more or less. 500 years ago, I don't believe that the Dutch people exist. Not the Italian people, and not German. I hope that there are not German here. It's very important. The notion of people, the notion of nations, it's a modern notion. The use of the concept of people to the Middle Age and the Antiquity is a little bit anachronistic, you understand? Because, ancient time, before the books, before the newspaper, before the TV, the radio, and the internet, peasants in an isolated village 50 kilometers from Amsterdam didn't know that they belonged to the Dutch people. You understand it? But today, you know, usually, I say Dutch people coming to Amsterdam, Utrecht, people are speaking the same language. True or not true? Now, if I'm using the word people to Dutch people, to German, Italian, French, how come that you are using the word Jewish people? Why I asked it? Because, you know, I'm very simple. I use the word Dutch people because people are speaking together some language. More or less eating some eatings. More or less hearing some music. Sings and all that. Now, the Jews in the world are speaking the same language? I'm sure that here in the audience there are people that consider themselves as Jews. But I cannot communicate with them in Hebrew. No? Then, if it's not the language, what it is? I am not a religious person, even if I'm speaking in the New Love frame. No, it's very important. I think that Judaism is a religion. Now, thinking why it's a people. Why we continue to repeat that the Jewish people is a people. Why? What is the definition of a people? By the way, there is not a scientific definition of a people. But usually we apply it to the human group that has something in common culturally. Secular, not only religious. You agree with me? How come that I calling all the cats cats, all the dogs dogs, but one cat is a dog? It's not very logic. And disturb me a lot. It's not a joke. I try to be rational in history, not in love, not in new love, but at least in history, at least in the basic concept of definition of human groups. And when I decided that I cannot use the word people about the Jews, all the trouble started with me in Israel. By the way, to be careful, I use the word Yiddish people because in some moment in the 19th century, it was crystallizing in East Europe a very, very specific culture, a very, very specific language with a lot of dialect inside it, but a crystallization of a daily culture, not only a daily culture, also a high culture of literature, Shalom Aleichem, Beschwizinger, belongs to what? You understand me? Belongs to a Yiddish people, a Yiddish culture, a Yiddish existence, a Yiddish identity that disappeared because of Bolshevism, because of Nazism, because of Zionism, and also emigration to New York and San Francisco. Yes, Woody Allen is gaining his life because of this culture, this humor, Yiddish humor. You understand? I don't contest, and it's very important to understand, the existence today of the Israeli people, or if you want, the Jewish Israeli people. But the question was, Woody Allen belongs to my people? He can understand my language? He has other tastes. You know, he likes much more Asiatic girls than Jewish girls. Everybody has a right to his taste. It's very important. It doesn't disturb me at all. It disturbs me the age of these Asiatic girls. But basically, it's not my problem. I don't try to keep a Jewish people like the Zionists is doing it, left or right, by don't let them to fall in love with non-Jewish. The menace, the threat of the Jewish people is love. You know it? Because a lot of young Americans from Jewish origin fall in love in Goy girls. You know what is Goy? Shikses in Yiddish. You imagine that there is a people that the only condition to continue to be a people is not falling in love with non-Jews. I ask you, this is history? Now, a few words. I have, how long more?
You have 7 minutes left.
Oof, I was sure that it's 5 minutes. Now, you know, all this what I tell you is not abstract. It has a direct relationship with the Israeli politics, daily politics. Do you know that Bibi Netanyahu insists to ask the Palestinians to recognize Israel not as an Israeli state, a fact, a historical fact that exists, but as a Jewish state? Do you know it? Yeah. He asked Abu Abbas to recognize Israel. I asked myself something, you know, it's very strange for me, because Obama and the Americans accepted. You know, I remember the day that I heard that Obama accept the principle that the Palestinian has to recognize a Jewish state. And I asked myself, how come? If tomorrow United States will define itself as a white Anglo-Saxon state, okay? We know that the first culture, the language of United States is Anglo-Saxon, white Anglo-Saxon. Then recognizing United States as the state of white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. Tell me it will be democratic? As we heard Yana before, at least 25% of the Israeli citizens, I'm not speaking of the apartheid territories, I'm speaking about Israel. 25% are not considered as Jews in the Israeli state. Then how come to call a country, a state, Jewish state? I have pupils in the Tel Aviv University from Palestinian origin. You can say Palestinian, you can say Arab, as you want. You know, the daily dialogue that I have with them, I'm ashamed about all this. A state that declared that it's not their state. You can imagine it? Not saying that Israel is an Israeli state with a basic of origin, Jewish origin, okay. Jewish tradition, okay. But not Jewish tradition, not Jewish origin, a Jewish state. Not an Israeli state. By the way, it's like Netherlands, Holland will declare that it's only the state of pure Christian. You will accept it? Even Wilders are not saying it, no? He said it? No. He is enough hypocrite not to say it. We are not hypocrite. Bibi Netanyahu is not hypocrite at all. He is declaring that he wants that you will recognize a Jewish state when a quarter of the population is not considered as Jew. 20% of Arabs origin, 5% of the poor immigrants from East Europe that married Jews and are not considered as Jews. You know it? And not buried in official cemetery. Cannot be buried. Now, I imagine that most of the people here will not accept to live in a country that a Christian cannot marry a non-Christian. Even if he is a Christian. In Israel, you cannot marry a non-Jew. Did you know it? Do you know it? In the fact, it's only one example, that there is not civic marriages in Israel, it's not because of the religious people, like the secular Jews are pretending. Not at all. Ben-Gurion in 47, signed with the religious when they were very, very nice people. not nationalistic. I am speaking in 1947. He signed and gave them all the permission to decide about marriages, burying, all these things. Why? He didn't know how to define a secular Jew. You understand it? And he was afraid that Jews will marry the non-Jews in the state of Israel. He agreed on it, because the secular Judaism, and a lot of you maybe consider themselves as a secular how we say, Jews? No? Jews? Jew? But the problem is you don't have definitions. If you don't looking for the DNA, Jewish DNA, like a lot of my colleagues in the Tel Aviv University are doing it. Now, to finish, I wrote the second book, The Invention of the Land of Israel, first of all to show you that Judaism is not Zionism. During the 2,000 years, Jews didn't want to come to the Holy Land. It was forbidden from the religious point of view. Do you know it? Jews couldn't come collectively to Palestine, to the Holy Land, because it was anti-Jewish. This is the reason that in the end of the 19th century, when the Zionism started to be active, all the Jewish establishment, Orthodox, Reformist, Conservative, were against Zionism. Why? Because the basic concept of Jews in all the 2,000 years was, first of all, the land doesn't belong to Jews. The land belongs to God. God gave, God took away, and when the Messiah will come, all the Jews with all the deaf people will return to the Holy Land. But till this day, till this minute, Jews cannot come and emigrate to the Holy Land. It's anti-Jewish to build a Jewish state. I try to prove it in the second book. You understand? The idea of the return of the Jews to the land, the Holy Land, to Palestine, to Judea, the idea was Christian, not Jewish. In the 19th century, before Herzl, before the Zionist movement, it was the evangelists in England that developed the idea of the return of the Jewish to the land. I try to prove it in the second book. I have to stop to be correct. No, I promise you not to pass the 20 minutes. It's exactly this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sand, for your words. I think they are a provoking basis for the rest of the evening. First of all, for our three respondents to give their view on what we just heard. Now, as Mr. Sand already said, the myths of Zionism and the myths of the Israeli state, is it okay? Yeah? Are also very relevant to Christianity. So the first person we invited is Alex van Heusden, who is at home here in the Nieuwe Liefde. He works here, and he's a biblical scholar. So we now have this idea of the Judeo-Christian civilization that suddenly popped up. And I'm very curious what Alex has to say about this. Alex, please.
Shlomo, thank you for your story and for your books. You are right when you say there is more resemblance between Judaism and Islam than between Judaism and Christianity. Nevertheless, Judaism and Christianity have an old story in common, sometimes a horrific story, until the first half of the 20th century. But Judaism and Christianity, they are also brothers in a way, or sisters. They grew up in the same time, from the 2nd century onward to the 6th century, in separate rooms, but with open doors, at least at first. The Christian theologians and church leaders on the one hand, and the Jewish teachers, the rabbis, on the other hand, developed their identities by looking close to each other. They mostly disagreed with each other, as brothers and sisters do. The evaluation of these historical processes in present-day research tend to move between the parting of the ways and the ways that never parted, and all thinkable distinctions between these two. After the horror of the Second World War and the Holocaust, and after the foundation of the State of Israel, in a tremendous complex historical, political, and ideological context, many Christians in the Western world supported the new reality of the Jewish people in their homeland. And they were helped by the fact that this new state on ancient soil presented itself as a Jewish state. That very fact shaped the opportunity to reconsider and apply old concepts like the chosen people and the promised land, exclusively for the Jews in their own Jewish state. Here in the Netherlands, the Protestant churches have declared themselves allies for eternity with Israel, in the Dutch language, onopgeefbaar verbonden. This is the first commandment of present-day Christian Israel theology. You shall never give up your alliance with the Jewish people, whether it is invented or not. It is a remarkable phenomenon, this alliance forever with Israel, and Israel here has a double meaning. The Jewish people wherever in the world they live, and the Jewish state. With no other state, the Protestant churches of the Netherlands have declared themselves alliance forever. Why this exception? And where are the Palestinians in this story? They are Muslims. No, not all of them. Some of them are Christians. Oh yes, that is true. But they support Hamas. This Western Judeo-Christian civilization, this alliance between Judaism and Christianity, religious formations as true brothers and sisters, when it comes to the sake of Israel, the Jewish state, and a Christian theology which serves as an Israel ideology. Shlomo, a question for you, a big one. We in the Western world, with this complex heritage, what should we do to help both Israel and Palestine to make at least some progress towards a solution for both, and perhaps even for the Middle East as a whole? Thank you.
I think that sometimes in history, Bad consciousness is a bad thing. What happened today with a lot of Christians, this bad consciousness pushed them to make new mistakes. You have to understand that sometimes I'm for bad consciousness. It's the basic of moral. But bad consciousness can make new mistakes and new crimes. You answer what you, as Christian, has to do today. First of all, I don't start with Israel to help the Palestinians with all the means possible, besides terror, because I'm against terror, to force Israel to make a historical compromise. You have to understand, Israel is a result of Zionist colonization. It has to be clear. It's 130 years we pushed away another population, people, nation, peu importe. We pushed away. It didn't start in 1967. It doesn't mean that I don't ask the Palestinian, that I don't ask the world to recognize the Israeli state. Israeli state, even if it's a result of colonization, it's a historical fact that you have to recognize. But the problem is today not the recognition of the Israeli state. It was years ago. Today is the recognition of the Palestinian state, of the Palestinian right, of a Palestinian future. You understand? They are the victims today. History is a story of changing places between hangmen and victims. You have to remember it.
Thank you very much. Now we find ourselves immediately in the middle of the debate. And as we gave this evening the name Israel-Palestine Myths and Realities, What Chances Left for Peace, I'm sure we will come back to this topic. Now first we have a second respondent. Thankfully, we also have dissident Jewish voices here in the Netherlands. And a very important supplier of such voices is Een Ander Joods Geluid, a different Jewish voice. And from the midst of a different Jewish voice, we have Andras Kraal, who will now respond.
Thank you. I am not a dissident Jewish voice. The other voices are the dissident voices. Thank you, Shlomo, for your challenging contribution. In 5 or 6 minutes, of course, it's totally impossible to give any fair reaction. I still will try some remarks on your ideas. I'm standing here ex cathedra, and I will also speak from the heart. I'm reminded by your presentation of a story of Boris Yeltsin. When Yeltsin was asked, how are things? His answer was, in one word, good. In 2 words, not good. Now, I first will briefly sketch what I consider your contributions, and secondly, my question marks, my criticisms and suggestions for discussion. I see as your most important contribution the link, the immediate link which you put between the ethno-nationalistic ideological heritage and day-to-day and long-term Israeli strategy and practice. That expresses itself in the way Israel treats its non-Jews on both sides of the Green Line. Secondly, it's becoming more extreme day by day. Your other contribution, I consider your emphasis on the need of a fundamental change very urgently, both for justice sake and also in Israel's own interest. Now, to my question marks, criticisms. You say a lot about historiography, the writing and thinking about history. You say much less, and in my view, much less that is really fundamentally solid about the actual history of the Jews. That is no wonder, because in the absence of reliable sources and reliable evidence, there will be always a lot of important connections and processes we simply never will know for sure. We have to accept that. Secondly, with respect, I think your approach is every bit as ideologically inspired as that of the Zionist historians, which you criticize. You also use their own, the same methodology. Everything that contradicts your own desired version of the reality is either left out or explained away. Everything that supports your own view is emphasized and made kind of more important by interpretation. Now, coming to
Please give me an example.
I will do that. Is that by the 6 minutes? I will give you an example.
4 minutes more. Example.
The example, okay.
1 minute, 1 example.
Yeah. The example is you cannot explain the connection that is in the Jewish religion with the so-called Land of Israel purely as a spiritual connection. You can say, rightly so, that there was no expulsion by the Romans, but there was, of course, destruction, disaster, and Jewish powerlessness. Now, as a reaction against that, Jews felt a connection, a longing for an own land, a place where they were not a minority but a majority. Now, of course, does not mean that the Jews were at that time a nation, but I think that you should at least give some weight to that. You cannot say that that's just in the spiritual sphere. We are living on earth.
Just. Spiritual is very important, not just.
Good. I'm not spiritual enough, but...
Yes, this is the problem.
This is the problem, okay. Now, as to solutions or as to questions of practical politics, I think all of us, or almost all of us, agree that the most important question is how can Israel be made to radically change its ways so as to make a decent solution possible? Now, I confess I feel the closest to people like Yeshayahu Leibovitz, like Uri Avneri, Mati Peled, Gideon Levi, Amir Haas, Gush Shalom. Why? Because they criticize Israel passionately and very radically, and they demand fundamental change, but without necessarily denying the Jews the right to claim that they are a people, without completely rejecting Zionism as such in its entirety. I must confess, I do believe that the Jews can and should reasonably be considered a people of a kind, if you like. Denying them that right is, in my view, not very just. I do believe that Zionism was primarily a bold, emancipatory movement for the Jews in the modern age, as you explain yourself, at least in your first book, if I read you correctly. I remember I was very moved here in Amsterdam 24 years ago to hear Edward Said, who is of course not the most extreme Zionist. But I heard Edward Said saying in the aula of the University of Amsterdam, of course Zionism was a colonial enterprise, but it was much more than a colonialist enterprise. To the Jews involved in it, it was deeply liberatory and emancipatory. I think you should not completely disregard that aspect. I wish that the world could be a perfect place, perfectly harmonious. It is not. For the Palestinian people, Zionism meant destruction, disaster, and intolerable injustice. To me at least, Israel's sin, if you like, that's spiritual. Israel's crime and Israel's stupidity seems threefold. Israel denies the original injustice committed against the Palestinians as individuals and as people. It has unnecessarily added massive new injustice since '67, and it keeps demanding a total Palestinian capitulation and keeps working hard on it. It is determined to destroy any possibility, any initiative for a decent historical compromise. To me, this is the central problem, not Zionism, not whether the Jews are a people or not. This is what we should concentrate on. This is what must be changed. Israel must change internally, but it will not do so without massive and decisive compulsion, outside pressure by the friendly powers that support it. It's not very likely in the meantime. How much time do I have left?
Your time is finished.
It's finished, yes. Okay. Then I will, just let me finish on a very cheerful note. Of course, a solution is not very likely. More horror seems to be coming before anything useful might happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andras. I am sure, Shlomo, you are burning with desire to respond, but it might be wise first to listen to Fadi, and then you can respond to both Fadi and Andras. Is that okay?
Because it will be the same critic.
No, I mean, So Fadi Herzala is a political scientist here at the University of Amsterdam. He studied economics and political science, and he works now as a researcher, a lecturer, a research consultant, and an editor, specializing in political and civic participation, digital media, and research methods. That's it. Fadi, please.
Thank you. I would like to begin with thanking Professor Sand for visiting us and for his lecture. Your work is without doubt a major contribution to the literature on Israeli or Jewish history, and I've enjoyed reading it much. Nonetheless, I do have some comments on your work generally and your lecture in specific, and I hope you will have time to respond to at least some of them. My first comment concerns the socio-political implications of the work in which you contend that Jews as a people and the land of Israel are political constructs rather than historic or biblical truths, if you will. From a scientific or secular point of view, I think that your people and land theses sound like truisms. Yet, I wonder how many Israeli... Langzaam, okay. Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, I will try to speak slower. I was saying that I strongly believe, from a scientific point of view, that your people and land thesis, I think they are very convincing, but I wonder how many Israelis think the same. While demonstrating how the Jews as people and Israel as land are invented is an impressive academic achievement, mainstream Jewish Israeli society seems to abide by a completely different belief system. I don't have exact statistics, but considering Israel's settlement policies and the country's obsession with being a Jewish state, for example, I'm afraid that the overwhelming majority of non-Palestinian Israelis will completely reject your thesis. Maybe you can tell us a bit more about that, about how your books are received in Israel. I imagine you often feel you are shouting in the desert in Israel, in the Israeli desert. You did your research, it was very thorough. You developed a convincing thesis, but Israelis don't believe it. Thus, my main question is it your hope, and perhaps also the purpose of your work, that future Israeli generations will demonstrate a greater ability and willingness to critically rethink their history and embrace a perspective like your own? Are there any changes visible already, and do you expect that such changes will or will not occur? This brings me to a second comment. concerning your thoughts about ending the conflict. You prefer a two-state solution based on the 67 borders above a one-state solution. I was wondering, do you think we need some kind of a cultural revolution, if you will, among Jewish Israelis, engendering a collective identity in which Jews as people and Israel as homeland are conceived more from a constructivist point of view, similar to yours, as a necessary condition of realizing a two-state solution? I'm asking this again as a way to gauge the social and political potential of your historical research and to place it in a broader context. To that purpose, there are, of course, also other related questions pertinent, such as, if secularization of Israeli society is instrumental to achieving a two-state solution, then what are the prospects for a peaceful Palestine in the foreseeable future? And secondly, assuming that the conflict is influenced by many factors, including factors that are shaped internationally and work economically, politically, militarily, how crucial is it, in the end, considering all factors together, that Jewish Israelis adopt an alternative worldview about their history as people and their relation to Eretz Israel? I will now turn to my final comment. I have read your as yet unpublished article titled Jewish State or Binational State, in which you reject the one-state solution because of the racist mindset of Israelis. This is what you say. Or more specifically, because of the ideological principles on which Israel is based as a Jewish state. In this article, however, and other texts as well, you don't seek direct support for the two-state solution in international law. You don't discuss it. You do argue, however, that Palestinians' right of return should not be implemented as part of a solution. And this has given me the impression, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that you don't use international law as a central point of reference in thinking about ending the conflict. Based on what I have read from and about you, you seem to be, first and for all, a pragmatist. You seek for solutions that seem to be most feasible. And I'm a great supporter for such pragmatism. But I also realize that it risks evading concerns that are crucial from a legal or Palestinian perspective. And I will not discuss these concerns at length at this point, but let me just discuss one matter, going back to how you characterize Israeli society as a racist society. Why should Palestinians abandon their right of return just because many Israelis have a problem? Why should Palestinians abandon their right of return because the Israelis are racists? Because of any other problem they have, such as an overt undemocratic obsession with having a state that is distinctively Jewish. I look forward to your responses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fadi. So now we have two very different responses, one from Andras and one from Fadi. So can I invite you, Shlomo, to respond very briefly, and then we will also have questions from the audience. So I think something important in what Andras said is that Zionism was also an emancipatory movement.
Yeah,
and
I want to...
don't the Jews have a right to claim themselves as a people, even though you say they are not a people? And then Fadi, who is asking you, so what are the results of your books? Are they finding, is Israeli society actually changing? And also, I mean, it's very important, I think, to bring up the Palestinians and their interest. So can the Palestinians give up their right of return because it doesn't fit into Israeli Jewish perspectives to allow for that? So please, maybe in 3 minutes, could you do that? Try.
3 minutes is difficult. No, really, it's a little bit... Sorry that I will pass in this case because it's very, very important, the political analysis. But very, very quick. A liberating movement? Even if Edward Said is saying it, It doesn't mean that it's true. It's not a proof. He wasn't a historian. He made a lot of mistakes historically. One of the mistakes is not to recognize the Israeli state, really, like others. No, I don't think the Zionism was a liberating movement. I think, first of all, the Zionism was a colonizator movement. The proof is very, very evident. There is not a place in the world that the Jewish cannot make their valise in going to Israel. They are not doing it. Only if they have economic problems like in France today. Sorry. But from the end of the 19th century till 1924, it's very important to understand it. I mean, from the beginning of the pogrom against Jewish in the Russian Empire in the 80s of the 19th century till 1924, 2.5 million of Jewish from the Russian Empire started to move to the West. They arrived to Berlin, they were kicked out. They arrived to Paris, they were kicked out. They arrived to Amsterdam, they were kicked out, and they arrived to New York and San Francisco. 2.5 million. Between these dates, the end of the 80s of the 19th century, in 1924, 2.5 million to America, 67,000 to Palestine. A liberating movement? Why? What happened in 1924? From this date, there were much more Jewish suffering refugees that arrived to Palestine. What happened? United States closed the gate to immigration from Eastern Europe. And then, when the Nazis arrived to power in 1933, a lot of German Jews that are very German and very, very little Jews, believe me, if I had time, I could tell you stories about these Germans from Jewish origin. They were obliged, to go to Palestine. They didn't want to go to Palestine. Most of the people, my parents, in 1948, didn't want to go to Palestine especially. They didn't have a choice, It was not a liberating movement for them. It was a refuge. But nobody wanted to accept them. You understand me?
I understand you.
Liberating? Liberating from what?
I think the point is clear.
Okay, continue.
Continue, yes.
No, but it's very important personally to me, because I was born in 1946 in the refugee camp in Austria. And I was brought to Palestine, or Israel, in the first months, because we don't have another place, not because it was a liberating movement. But leave it besides. You put too many questions politically, then I cannot very quickly, and I will do it briefly, okay? The most important question is, why my political positions are so moderate? Really, after this analysis about Zionism, about the history of Judaism, etc., etc. By the way, spiritual, one thing that killed me, for modern people, it's very difficult to understand spiritual, religious feelings. And you are not enough religious. You are not making enough effort to understand what were the people 200, 300, 400 years ago. The Holy Land was very, very important, but not as a holy land. Not as a homeland at all. If you don't understand it, you don't understand history. 400 years ago, 1,000 years ago, there were not homelands. Now, about political conclusion. 1 minute. You know, morally, really, morally, I think that the best solution will be one state of Jewish, Arabs, Christian, Jewish, Muslims. But politically, in my age, I'm a realistic. When I was young, I was much more utopist than today. I kept a lot of utopy in my political project. I kept a lot, but I am not an utopist. Now, the most important question for you that you put me forward, I am for two-state solution. Not that I think it's a good solution. First of all, till this moment, the Palestinians want a Palestinian national state. It's not me to decide for them. They propose a Palestinian national state in the border of 67. I hope that the audience here tomorrow will fight for this. And I tell the representative of the Israeli embassy here that yes, I'm for every action to force Israel to retreat to the 67 borders. Now, and you can do a lot of things to save us from the own wills. You understand me? And especially to save of the Palestinian children of tomorrow. It's much more important. Now, you heard that I'm not for the right of return. I'm not for the right of return of the Palestinian to Israel because I think that there is a contradiction between the right of return and the recognized of the Israeli state. Not as a Jewish state, as an Israeli state. Why? Because we are dealing with 5 million descendants of refugees. In proposing, convincing 5 million descendants of Palestinian refugees, it's meaning to destroy the cultural daily morphology of the Israeli state. It's clear. It's to propose the Dutch people today, 16 million, you are 16 millions? It's like to proposing you of 15 millions that will come from Suriname to Holland. Now, there's a difference because these people were kicked away in 48. In Israeli is the responsible of the Palestinian problem. You have to, it's clear for me. Israeli is the first responsible of the Palestinian problem. But you know, in history you cannot go back. You can repair a lot of things. You have to educate every Israeli that he is the responsible what happened in 48. But there is a difference between political project in absolute justice. There is not absolute justice in politics. Always it's a relative justice. Now, if Israel is the responsible of the refugees problem, the Arab world, the Arab nationalism is also a responsible of this tragedy. Why? You have to know that between 47 and 50, or 45 and 50, these 5 years after the Second World War, there were millions of refugees that were kicked out from India to Pakistan. 1 million. For Pakistan, a million Muslims that were kicked out from India to Pakistan. You know it. Million of Hindus that were kicked out from Pakistan to India. 2 million of German people speaking German from the Sudet. You heard about it?
Shlomo, I have to ask you to be brief, because we also want to hear the audience.
About this question.
We love your answer. Please go ahead. We came to learn.
No, I try to be correct, but it's so delicate, this problem, and I feel badly. I have a bad consciousness speaking about this subject. But I have to be consequence of myself or politically. Now, you have to know this refugees problem It was a tragedy everywhere, but the most tragic case is the Palestinian case. Why? Because all the other cases of refugee problem was resolved by being accepted in national status. Only in the case of the Palestinian, the Arab world didn't want to integrate them. Even if Zionism is the responsible, they kept them 67 years in the shit camp, growing up children in this shit condition with all this Arab solidarity. Yes, Israel is the responsible. Israel has to pay for it. Israel has to educate its children about this tragedy. But Israel cannot, you cannot ask politically Israel to accept 5 million descendants of Palestinians to come to Israel. You can ask it. But it was, for me, not a political action. Now, I am against the right of return. I am for a real return of refugees Palestine to Israel in a peace agreement. Symbolically, not only symbolically. The refugees, they are living in Lebanon camp, the worst condition, by the way, because in Syria and Jordan it's better a little bit. Israel has to accept them. All the refugees in Palestinian refugees in Lebanon that the Lebanon society didn't integrate it, their place is in Galilee for me. I am for the return in the peace process, you understand? But one thing is important for the Israelis. Yes, Israeli society, one of the most racist society today in the world. Yes, I have to take it in account in every thinking about political solution. You understand? You understand from my books that I don't make compromise with Jewish racism. And Jewish racism exists. I don't make any compromise. But in political project, you have to understand me. I have to take it also in account. You understand me? You can propose, you can force Israel to accept some compromise. You cannot force them to become a minority in their own state from a day to tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex, Fadi and Andras, can I invite you to come and sit here? Now, I think the best thing
Don't be afraid for me.
No. I think the best thing to do is try to collect some questions from you. So please, when you have a question, raise your hand. And Nikki has a microphone. But let me first explain. I want to try to group the questions in 3 groups. So first, the question that Alex had, which is, I think mainly, what can we do in churches as Christian people or as a Dutch society? What can we do? And then the second question raised by Andras, but what about, I mean, can the Jews still call themselves a people? And what about Zionism as a liberal or a movement of liberalization?
Not liberalization,
Sorry,
emancipation,
emancipation.
And
Yes, emancipation. And then finally, Fadi's main point about the Palestinian perspective and the right of return, and also the need in Israeli society to come up with a new narrative, I think. So I think something all speakers agreed on is that there is a very urgent need for the Israeli state to change its politics. So please, if you can ask your question, be brief. So no monologues, but just a question. And please try to say for who the question is meant. There's a question over there.
Microphone.
Oh.
Yeah, this question is for Mr. Shlomo.
I am very puzzled when you say you consider yourself Zionist. I would like to hear a little bit more about
Scientist?
that. Zionist.
Zionist. If I'm Zionist, no.
Yeah, you said.
No, I say that I'm not anti-Zionist. I will explain.
Please
okay?
explain, okay?
Very quickly. You see, I consider myself as anti-Zionist till 75, arriving in France as a student and discovering that anti-Zionist for the leftists in France in 75 was to deny the Israeli right of existence. In this moment, I changed my definition and I decided not to define myself anti-Zionist, even if I never was a Zionist. I am not Zionist, and I don't think that I will be before I will, pushing the door of the exit. Now, why I'm not a Zionist? Because I'm Democrat. You have to understand, a Zionist, even the Zionist left insists of a Jewish state. And I am not for a Jewish state. You understand me? I cannot define myself anti-Zionist because this mixed, not clear position of a lot of anti-Israelis that deny the existence of this society and are dangerous in my point of view. I cannot be a Zionist, and I insist that I'm not a Zionist. You can define me, if you want, post-Zionist, but because I accept one of the results of the Zionist colonization, the establishment of an Israeli state. Clear?
Thank you. Let's collect 4 questions. There's one here, and one there. And is there a 4th question? Okay, can we collect these 3 questions? And we will go upstairs after these 3 questions.
Okay. This is for Mr. Sand. I want to thank you very much for coming to speak this evening. I'm a great admirer of your work, which I consider truly inspiring. One of the most shocking things I read in your latest book was that, in a sense, Hitler won the war. Essentially, if I understand correctly, you say that Nazi ethnocentrism and Zionist ethnocentrism are based on similar principles, that of Jewish people possessing a certain racial identity. You show that to be completely false. Do you not then think we ought to be trying to reverse this situation, to rescue Judaism, which has been hijacked by Israel, to recover the non-ethnically obsessed, non-nationalistic, non-militaristic, humane, integrated Jewish world that Hitler tried to destroy? And how might we do so?
Thank you. Yes. The next question, please.
Okay. No, this I understood, yeah.
Question is for Shlomo. I wanted to ask, you said 20% is excluded in the Jewish state. So I would like to know, is it possible then to compare to the situation in South Africa under apartheid? Okay. It's my Jewish and other friends in the ANC, they told me it is coming there is exactly like apartheid. If I tell this to my Jewish friends here, said no, because it's not in the constitution, so it's completely different.
Yeah,
Thank
understood.
you.
Thank you.
And another question?
Yeah. What was wrong with Maimonides if he was not a good Jew? We're going to Palestine at the time. And secondly, are you a soulmate of Gilad Atzmon?
Can you say it again?
Please.
What was wrong with Maimonides when he went to Palestine, to the land of Israel?
What is wrong with
Maimonides, the Rambam.
Maimonides?
Yeah. You said it was not a Jewish thing to go back to the country.
When he went to Palestine.
Okay. Thank you very much for this question, last question, really. Do you know?
No, can you please? Because we would finish at 9:30. We will take 15 minutes extra. So and we also have people upstairs who want to ask questions. So please try to be brief.
Thank you for the last question, because the Rambam, the Maimonides, came to Palestine. He was in the north of the state for a while. He went to Hebron, to Jerusalem. he looks around and decided to went away very quickly. He went to Cairo. Now, the brief visit in Palestine was enough for him, you say. He left and developed his ideas in Cairo and not in Palestine. He didn't like to be in Palestine. It's very interesting, the story, but I have no time. Believe me, you can open the Wikipedia to see it. Remind me the first question.
The link between Nazi.
No, I never compared Nazism and Zionism.
No, it's not about comparing, but it's that.
No, 1 minute. No. It's rhetorical.
Okay.
The Nazis has an ethnocentric concept, ethno-biological concept. Zionism has an ethno-religious and sometimes ethno-biological. They have some of their origin in common. But there is a big difference. I never compare Nazism with Zionism, not because I think that Zionism is an emancipatory movement, but I think that never in Zionism there were not a project of liquidation another population.
Referring to to the sentence that in certain respects Hitler was the victor of the Second World War.
This is another question.
Within a few years, his perverted ideology infiltrated itself.
Yeah, understood. You don't have to read it. First of all, I want to insist that I don't compare the two political process or project, even if they have some common origin. Because they belong to this kind of nationalism of Central and Eastern Europe that were not a civic political nationalism, but an ethnocentric, like in Poland, like in Ukraine till today. You understand me? I don't think that Zionism is Nazism. Even both of them, I cannot accept. But Zionism was never in any analogy between Zionism now. About the other question, if you want, that Hitler won, this is your question. Yes, he was beaten militarily, fortunately, but some of his concepts continue to exist till now. First of all, anti-Semitism, that exists less and less in the Western world, but less and less. No. The people, more and more, when you say it, you have to, it shows me that you don't know what was anti-Semitism between the middle of the 19th century and the middle of the 20th century. You don't know what was anti-Semitism.
I know more than you know.
It's not because I am a professor of history. Today in the Western world, you cannot find a public political anti-Semitism. You cannot find an MP member, not in Holland, not in England.
Many variations of anti-Semitism.
Let me finish it. The fact that you think you cannot find even one political public representative of a political party in the Western world, I'm not speaking about Hungary, you cannot find an official journalist in the electronic media, in the written media that is anti-Semitic. You cannot find a writer, official, that is accepted in all the circles of writers that is anti-Semitic. You don't understand what was a real anti-Semitism during this century, between the middle of the 19th century till the middle of the 20th century. There is anti-Semitism, less and less politically public. There is anti-Semitism in the march between radical Muslims in Europe. But ask yourself, please, why Wilders is not anti-Semitic? Why the Independent Party in England is not anti-Semitic? Why all or most of the extreme right-wing parties in Europe are not anti-Semitic? They are very...
Anti-Semitic
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Readers, the most important thing is, if you want to understand something, you know who is Marine Le Pen? Marine Le Pen? You know, to this generation of Catholic, traditional, anti-Semitic in France. Yeah. His daughter, a good proof that blondes are not stupid. No, I'm not joking. She's very clever. Now, this is very important. She becomes every month more pro-Israeli, more pro-Zionist, more pro-Jews. 3 months ago, the French government was thinking to forbidden the Jewish League of Defense. It's forbidden in Israel, it's forbidden in the United States. Who came out to defend the League of the Jewish Defense? That is a very provocative movement. Marine Le Pen. Today, very good Jews that declare that they are Jews. The mayors in the south of France are Jews. I repeat, ask, s'il vous plaît, ask why the extreme right in Europe, maybe they are not honest. Maybe they are hypocrite.
Yes, yeah.
Maybe. But one thing, hypocrisy is important. I'm living in a society, in a political culture, that the racists are not a hypocrite. Once upon a time in Europe, the racists were not hypocrites. You know it? Today, maybe they are hypocrites. For me, as a political person also, it's important that they are not anti-Semitic. Unfortunately, they are very anti-Arab, they are very anti-Muslims. You can be a political person in Europe anti-Muslim. You can be a political journalist in Europe anti-Arab.
Okay,
it's a big difference for me.
Thank you very much.
Now, return to the question. One thing about Hitler. Hitler won in one thing. You know, 100 years ago, if somebody say that the Jews are a race, was considered as a racist, anti-Semitic. Today, if Shlomo Sand said that the Jewish are not a people race, he is considered as anti-Semitic. Thank you.
No, I think the discussion about anti-Semitism is in fact very relevant. Maybe it's time for the Nieuwe Liefde to also organize a different evening, which is not this evening, about that. Maybe there was one last question about South Africa and apartheid.
Yeah. Sorry. You know, I become tired. It's very important. I'm politically for two-state solution. I think that in history, modern history, some models, radical models, were very, very bad. The Russian Bolshevik Revolution made a lot of harms, a lot of problems to the working class movement in Europe. It was a model, you know. Because of it, all the relationship between capital and work in Europe, all the resistance against fascism, Nazism, took a very bad turn because of the Bolshevik Revolution. The model of Cuba, with Che Guevara, was a bad model for the Latin American movements. I think so. The model of South Africa is a very model if you apply it on the conflict between Israel and Palestine. Why? You see, the reason that we arrived to stop the apartheid in South Africa was the dependence of the white colonizer or the descendant of colonizer, their dependence of the black work. They couldn't live without the blacks in South Africa. Do you know it? Zionism in the colonization was much more clever. They built a society, ethnic society, pure. More than to exploit the natives, they pushed them away. You understand it? Israel can continue to exist without the occupied territories. The white in South Africa couldn't. You understand me? Now, this is the beginning of the difference. It's much more complicated, but only because of time. It's not complicated, it's much longer. Nothing is complicated, you have to know. Only in love, because I return, only in love, because we are in the house of new love. This is a very complicated story in my life, but it's not your interest, my life stories. It's not complicated, it's longer, and Jana is very nervous that I'm speaking.
She is very nervous.
Okay.
And she insists that we now go upstairs. Can we have 2 questions from the people upstairs?
I would like to ask actually the whole panel the following questions. How do you define your nationality, all of you? To which people do you belong? A second question is your attitude to BDS. Mr. Sand, I would like to ask about, to comment about you mentioned the Yiddish nation. Could you comment about the territorialists and the Bundists in that context?
Maybe this is enough. And then another question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's all? Okay.
Oh,
I convinced everybody.
I would like to ask the man who wrongly considers himself to be not the dissident, that you claim that you are not a dissident, that your point of view is not the dissident point of view.
Andras said, I introduced you as a dissident, and then you said you are not a dissident.
Yes.
What is your question?
I would like you, I presume that I think you also mentioned that you are a secular person.
Yes.
Yes? Why would you consider yourself to be a Jew then? What is the sense of it?
A very good question, but what does that have to do with dissidents?
No, there's 2 questions.
Oh, there's 2 questions. Oh,
So first, Andras, there are questions to you.
There's only one question, but I didn't agree with your defining yourself as the not dissonant. You are a dissonant. You're in a tiny minority. So you are a dissident. That's what a dissident means. A dissident is not someone who represents the majority of the people. So
Okay,
you are a dissident.
Do you want Andras to
But my
comment
question
on-
is, if you are a secular person, you don't have religion, what is the sense of your connecting yourself with this thing called Jewishness? What makes you a Jew? What is your connection with it?
Andras, please.
a very good question. Now, first of all, is that okay? Yeah. First of all, I said, of course, that I'm not the dissident, but the others, the majority, because I think that the majority should think and talk in a more decent way. That's one.
That's not what dissonance means. Okay.
That's fine. It's fine that you define me, but I define myself. And secondly, why do I consider myself a Jew if I'm not religious? That is because I'm not a religious Jew, so I don't have to accept the Orthodox definition, nor do I have to accept Shlomo's definition. I think I am a Jew because I am born of people who consider themselves Jews, were considered Jews by others. Unfortunately, also, my father was killed because he was a Jew. Now, that is not to say in order to pressure you, but I think that is a significant fact. And I also can tell you, I can also tell Shlomo, who was born in a refugee camp in Austria, I was born slightly more to the east, 3 years before you. And after the war, I was born in Hungary. And in Hungary, it was customary with the census that people had to declare or could declare their nationality in the Eastern European sense, not in the Western Europe. That means their identification with what people do they identify. In all the years before the war, my mother wrote Hungarian. In 1946, she wrote Jewish. That is why I consider myself a Jew.
Okay. Thank you very much. So now we arrive at the question of the lady. To all the panelists, how do you define your nationality? Fadi, can I begin with you?
Yeah. Well, I think I would consider myself to be Dutch and Palestinian, but only for practical reasons. I have to say I don't really care about nationalism or nations. I don't attach a sentimental value to it, but for practical reasons, I live here. My parents are from Palestine. I would say I'm Palestinian Dutch.
Thank you. Alex.
I'm a student of the Apostle Paul, so I consider myself a world citizen.
Anders.
An old friend of mine, when he had to make a stopover in the old Rhodesia, in the white Rhodesia, had to fill in a form and he was asked about race. He filled in Homo sapiens. Now, that's one. Secondly, nationality. I have a Dutch, a Hungarian and an Israeli passport. I consider myself a Hungarian Jew.
And finally, Shlomo.
It's a private thing. Now,
so you can be mild.
Now, very important, the question. You see, I specialize in the questions of nationalism, nationality, people, the last 12 years. The books is only a part of my research. It's very simple. My nationality is an Israeli one. And not only this, my first identity, if you want, the point of departure for me, from identical point of view, is the fact that I'm Israeli. Why? Because the first word in love was in Hebrew. Why? Because I was educated and I loved the place that I came. You understand? It's very simple. Now, the problem is that in my identity card in Israel, it wasn't written that I have an Israeli nationality. It's written that I have a Jewish nationality. Then I am coming to him and saying one thing about identity politics and identity problems. I can accept the point of view that Judaism, Jewish identity can be a point of departure for this person, a friend of mine. But it cannot be today, for a secular Jew, not for religious, a point of arrival. The point of arrival is this friend here has to be universal, cosmopolite. The point of departure can be with a lot of colors. You understand me? We have to fight in this age of the beginning of the 21st century to be less tribal. You understand me? We are living a very, very bad age. Not only in Europe, also outside Europe, also in the Middle East. Then, you know, a lot of identity. Identity is not a hat. You can have a lot of them. You understand? It's very important to understand, and I wrote a book about it. But I decided to stop to define myself as a Jew, because I am living in a state that defines themselves as a Jewish state. Then, for me, it's clear. I'm a privileged person in Israel because I am Jew, and I don't accept it. Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much. It's tempting to stop here, but I think there's one word still in the air, which is peace. What chance is left for peace? Correct. Now, peace is a very big word, but I would like to challenge the four of you to say in 3 sentences only your response to this big question: what are the chances left for peace? And if peace is too big, what are the chances left for a solution? Fadi, can I start with you again?
3 sentences. I think the chances for peace, if there are any chances, Israel is working hard to make one-state solution actually the only solution possible by the settlement project. So if we are looking for peace, more and more we have to look in the direction of the one-state solution. Although I fully understand your objections or your doubts about that, I think the one-state solution is getting more and more feasible than the two-state solution.
Thank you.
I don't know what the political possibilities are right now. That's very difficult in the Middle East. But I think it's very important that Jews, Christians, and Muslims meet each other and begin to learn with their own holy books all open for them, and then talk about what connects them, what are the differences, and how can we reach each other as a signal to the political authorities.
Thank you.
The foreseeable chances for peace and a decent solution are -0 for the foreseeable period by any normal normal possible view. Sorry? Oh, the logical, the factual chances for peace in the foreseeable future, quite some years and decades, are -0 in my view. Shlomo said, I am not sufficiently religious. The only realistic chance is divine intervention.
Thank you.
Divine intervention.
Now, Shlomo, the last 3 sentences of this evening are for you.
I am very, very pessimistic. I don't believe a change can come from the Israeli society. I don't believe that there is in Israel political force that can change the politics. Then I'm any pressure, as I say before, from you on Israel to change politics. But something very important maybe, if I'm not optimistic, I am not fatalistic. You have to know, there is a big difference. Because, you know, my parents decided that, to make the child after the war, that Shlomo Sand, it was a very, very time. You know, if they continue to be non-fatalistic, I am not fatalistic, but I don't believe that something can come out today from the Israeli society, left or right.
Sorry, could you please answer the question about BDS then, because you say pressure.
Exactly the last question. Any pressure besides terror is welcome to help us. Any, okay?
Thank you for the reminder about BDS. I forgot that, and I do think it's crucial.
I answer it, no? It's clear.
Yeah. Thank you all very much for coming and for participating. Thank you very much, Shlomo Sand, for your precious presence here. And also Fadi, Alex, and Andras.